Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Topeka, Kansas. We're having such a great time at Light of the World Christian Church right here in Topeka. We're here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you're in the area, come be with us. We're here in mornings and night sessions. We just started this morning, had a great time. And if you can, if you're anywhere near Hattiesburg next week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we'll be in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, getting into the Word, having a great time about the coming of the Lord. So we're coming every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war, because, you know, the rapture signless, but the Ezekiel 38 war happens just after that, so we can kind of tell how close we are, because the second coming has tons of signs. Our new book, End Times Made Easy, we got 75 or 77 some odd signs. It's flawless, it's blatant. Why would the Lord put so much information in the Bible if He didn't want us to know? Remember, He said, lift up your heads, your redemption's drawing nigh, indicating you could be living when all the signs are happening and you're downtrodden. So He wants you happy, He wants you filled with joy. So we get into everything every week to show us where we are. Why? Jesus rebuked the Pharisees all the time, but only one time He rebuked the crowd. He said, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour, your visitation. So He wanted them to know. So much is happening around Israel every week that literally points to the tribulation period, that time of Jacob's trouble, that 7-year period. So let's pick up on what's happened this last week. This is pretty remarkable. Twice you had Israel using the military going into Syria and into Tehran. The news doesn't say anything about it this week. This last Saturday, Israel fired drones into Iran, blowing up a munitions base right there in Tehran. On the edge of Tehran, the capital of Iran, Israel bombed it and blew it up. They said the sound was so loud you could hear it for hundreds of miles. Okay, so that happened this last week. Why? Because Iran is just completely bent on destroying Israel, and the International Atomic Energy Agency said Iran has gone through the threshold. They have enriched uranium, have enriched plutonium. They have enough for 4 bombs. Now listen to this. Right now, Iran has 18 times more enriched uranium than it had during the Obama administration. That's how much further they've gone in making a material for nuclear weapons. So Israel had to go in and bomb right by Tehran, and then you had missiles going from the Golan, northern Israel, into Syria and bombing just outside Damascus. What were they bombing? They were bombing Hezbollah sites, Iranian sites, where missiles had made their way from Iran down into Syria and parked on the border of Israel. I don't think sometimes we realize it, but when you're in the Golan Heights, the northern part of Israel, you can see the lights of Damascus right there. It's not that far. So Iran keeps blatantly and boldly going past what the International Atomic Energy Agency said and doing that. They even have a new tunnel to an underground facility there in Natanz. So Israel's going to have, we talked about it last week, Israel's going to have to do something about that. They've used cyber security to do things and cyber attacks to stop them so far, but they did blatantly last week say we can send F-35s there without having them to be refueled. With that, America has moved B-1 bombers from Edwards Air Force Base in America all the way over to Europe to get them ready for this too. So you got nation after nation getting ready. Now, crazy stuff's happening along with that. There's more to that though in a minute. You had Lithuania, and you have Estonia, and you have Latvia. It literally looks like it could pull NATO into World War III with Russia. Russia even talked about the naval blockade there with Lithuania. The naval blockade that they started, Russia said, we will bring out our nuclear weapons. So, I mean, you have the talk of what happens after we're raptured. What happens after we're raptured? You got this first seal is the Antichrist. The next seal is you got 25% of the world's population can get killed. You have hyperinflation. You have all these things happening. And man, you see the setup for it right now. I mean, you look at what's happening with Israel, and the crazy thing with Israel is they got new elections coming up. So even this last week, the Knesset completely was disassembled, and there is no majority. So we'll have to wait till October to see who the prime minister is going to be. Right now, Lapid's going to be there in place, but this week, Hezbollah and Hamas talked about. This is so crazy how a nation or a group of people that want to kill Israel talk about, we're going to get together and start another war with Israel. Used to, they did things quietly. Now they verbalize, we're going to get together and have another war with Israel. So Israel's in the crosshairs in the middle of all this stuff, even with the Russia, with the Ukraine. You got everything pointing to Israel. So you got oil and gas that was shut off by Europe. You have France had some changes with Macron. It looks like the far right want to vote there. So I think it's in the cards and a setup for the president of France to come more to the forefront there. So you have Taiwan, you have China boasting about their supersonic missiles, because Taiwan last week said they have a hyper missile that can bring things to a front immediately. So you got earthquakes in Taiwan, you got earthquakes all over the earth. We don't even talk about the weather being as weird as it is. They said there's a solar flare that could happen this week that we could feel in the emittance of it right here on the earth. So you got things with nature, things with nations, setting up for the coming of the Lord. How blessed are we? But we always go to the Word. We finish up with the Word. Number 1, Israel made a nation. Number 2, Jerusalem won back. Jesus said the generation that sees those 2 events will not pass away till all is fulfilled. But you got the Hebrew language restored. You got the revival of the Roman Empire. You got the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You got the fertility of the land of Israel. You had foxes show up on the Temple Mount. You had fish in the Dead Sea. This is crazy. You had the Dead Sea turn blood red where Sodom and Gomorrah was. What day did it turn blood red a few months ago? The Day of Atonement. So you got birds, 172 different species of predatory birds start showing up in the land. So you've got all these different groups that the Bible said you'd see and all these signs that the Bible said you'd see right now. So what do? We react by going, I've got to help my local church. I've got to help my local pastor, because this is it. I mean, there's men will be lovers themselves. We have selfie sticks. So you've got every one of these groups. The Temple Mount Institute, they're in position, ready to have sacrifices. So group after group after group in position. Russia literally ready to have the Ezekiel 38 war. I mean, you can't get any bolder than going into the Ukraine, going into Crimea. And they talked about a land bridge so that they can make this happen even easier. So literally the mindsets of what's going on all over the earth is happening. In the UK, in England, if a man walks in the emergency room and looks like he's under 60, they have to ask him if he's pregnant, because it could be a woman that's turned into a man. They don't want to hurt the baby. That's the time that we live right now. It's absolutely the days of Noah. So with all these things together, you even got signals. You had blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles, 4 in a row. It's called a tetrad. When's the last time you had 4 in a row? 1967 when Jerusalem was won back. 1948 when Israel was made a nation, 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. So you have that, then you have the Bethlehem star. Jupiter, Regulus, and Venus. You had Regulus do retrograde motion and form a crown over Jupiter when Jesus was born. This last year, NBC Nightly News, we have a celestial event, Jupiter, Regulus, Venus, Bethlehem star. First time in 2,000 years. What was the constellation when he was born? Virgo. What was the constellation this last year? Leo. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. So wow, how blessed are we to be living in the generation that the King is coming back. There's sign after sign after sign after sign after sign showing us. So this is the time to hustle. Remember, we don't get in this as an escape theology. We get in this as an acceleration theology. As you see the finish line, you run faster, not slower. So this is it. I've heard people go, all these signs have all happened before. No, these have never happened before. We're the only generation that have these specific signs of His return. So what is it for? It brings you great joy. You're about to see Jesus. Great joy produces great strength. You're about to see the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Bright and morning star, lily of the valley, firstborn from the dead, the shepherd and the bishop of our souls, Jesus of Nazareth. Hey, we'll come back next week. We'll look at what's happened with Israel. Think of them going into Tehran this last week. Think of them going into Damascus this last week. A lot's happening in a short period of time. We're so blessed. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the edu at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.